Hey everyone, this is Amber Key, and you're listening to a Bright Idea podcast, a show where I sit down with entrepreneurs to discuss the aha moments that launched their businesses. On today's episode, we're joined by founder of Dembo Incorporated, Stephanie Coradin. As the founder of Dembo Incorporated, Stephanie brings over 18 years of expertise in leadership and development training, along with life coaching for individuals and groups across diverse industries. With an MBA and a master's degree in mental health counseling, her unique background equips her to uncover hidden barriers to growth and offering impactful solutions. Stephanie's philosophy centers on the power of employee empowerment and dynamic leadership. She understands that when leaders prioritize valuing their team members and entrusting them with responsibility, it creates a culture where everyone is inspired to excel. In today's episode, we explore Stephanie's insights, strategies, and passion for fostering growth and resilience in both individuals and organizations. Whether you're a leader seeking to empower your team or an individual striving for personal development, Stephanie's wisdom will inspire you to reach new heights. So Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm super excited to have you on a Bright Idea podcast as an emotional leadership coach and also just leadership development. I think that it's so important, especially this podcast being a podcast that speaks with entrepreneurs and encourages entrepreneurs to grow their businesses, how important your services are to helping them grow sustainable businesses, but also hiring and making their employees feel seen and welcome. Yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. How are
Thank
you?
I'm well. Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and I love talking about all things employees and leadership. So it's a pleasure.
Yes, absolutely. Before we dive in, I love to kind of get a background on
Mhm.
my guests. It's so funny. People go down these career paths thinking that they're going to do one thing in life, and then they end up doing something totally different. And so I'm so interested to know how you got into this. But first, like, where are you from? Like, who are you? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I was born and partially raised in Brooklyn, New York. I live in sunny South Florida now. And by way of the islands, my parents are from Haiti. I went to school in Haiti for a couple of, I should say like maybe 5 or 6 years. So hence the little island accent you may pick up on every now and then. So that's it. I live in Florida. I've lived here for about 20 something years now, with my husband and my two girls and just living the good life.
Love that. What brought you to Florida?
As a matter of fact, I was just leaving high school and going into college, and I wanted to transition into here. And when I told my mom I wanted to go to school in Florida, she decided, you know what, let's just all move to Florida.
Oh,
So we all came to Florida.
no, that's awesome. And so take me through like your childhood. Like, what was it like growing up? How would your parents like describe you?
So I was a little grown up. I was always the calm and collected one, the serious one. My cousin, who I grew up with, kind of like my brother, he always says, "Oh, when we tell Stephanie, let's go play," she would be like, "Oh no, I'm a princess. I don't want to fall." So that was me. I was an only child for 9 years. And I think that had something to do with it too. I always, thought I was the spoiled only child, But then my sister came and I became little mommy.
Mhm.
So
Did you always see yourself as like a leader?
yes. From as long as I can remember. I don't know that I would say I saw myself, but people came to me, and that I guess we'll go into that soon. But that's what led me into psychology. But people would come to me for advice all the time. From when I was like maybe 12 or 13, my friends they saw me as like the wise one, quote unquote, and so I was always really that leader for people.
Yeah. What did
Hmm.
you want to be? You said that you moved from the islands to Florida with your
Hmm.
family, in pursuit of like going to college. What did
Hmm.
you want? What did you study in college and what sort of career path did you think you'd go on?
So I studied business administration with a concentration in management.
Mm,
So my career path was on operations. And I stayed there for a little while, yes. So while I started school, well, my last year of high school, I was here. So I started serving at a restaurant, at a sports bar, actually. And once I hit 18, I got my liquor license and started bartending.
mm,
And from there, I went into hotels, right? And so my career kind of transitioned into hospitality, even though I was supposed to stay, on an operations track. And I say I stayed there kind of just because I worked my way from, front desk all the way up, and I kind of worked operation jobs in between.
mhm,
But at the end, towards the end of my corporate career, I ended up being the director of learning and development. So I kind of strayed away from operations. But in between all of that, I decided that I wanted to go into counseling. So I went back to school and got a master's degree in mental health counseling. I did 2 years of counseling, but never left hospitality. So I was doing counseling in the evenings for an eating disorder facility.
mm.
And I quickly decided that there was too much red tape. I already had my two daughters, and I was working in an eating disorder facilities where there was a bunch of girls who, were going through trauma, and I just was taking that home with me.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know if this is what I want to do for, the rest of my life in this capacity, right? I
Mhm,
love counseling, but not in that capacity. So that's when I started to strategize how I can use my learning and development experience and my mental health counseling experience together. And that's where most of my model and framework now came
mhm.
from.
You have a really interesting background, and
Mhm,
especially the path, I guess, where you mend the corporate hospitality experience with your mental health training and counseling experience. And so I just want to know, like, from your job experience working in corporate America, like,
mhm.
what was that experience like? And I guess, what about that experience did you feel needed to change, or that you could kind of infuse this learning from the mental health space or psychology space that you could like add to?
Sure. So, like I said, I started at the very bottom of hotels. So, I started as a front desk agent, and I literally worked my way up and worked through different departments. And the one thing that I noticed is that training wasn't like the way it should be, whether it's in one hotel or the other, because it's not anybody's fault. It's just that it's a very busy industry, and
Yeah.
they like to just, hey, you have the experience for 2 days, go and do what you got to do, right? So people are unhappy when they don't know what they're supposed to do, or when they don't have the tools and the skills to do what they're supposed to do. But on the flip side of that, when they do get the training, it's usually some cookie cutter training that's like created for 10,000 hotels on a chain, right? And
Right.
it's not specific to the environment that they're in. And so that's when I started, realizing that if I'm going to be designing these trainings, I need to figure out a way to make them not only personal to the environment that we're in at the moment, but
Hmm.
also conducive to the team members that are going to be taking that training, and how it could help them not only grow as employees, but also as people,
Yeah.
and so that's how I kind of started, creating frameworks that worked with more emotion, like for leaders to open up and be more vulnerable and communicate better, and stuff like that.
I could imagine being in hospitality, how difficult it may be to come up with the perfect framework to train people because as you mentioned, it's very busy. There's a lot of people. It's a lot of like churn and burn and like turnover too.
Hmm.
I think especially when you think about hospitality, you don't think about the people that are like in the C suite, like making all the decisions. You really do think about the people that are like right out of school. This might be their
Hmm.
first job. And like,
Hmm.
what sort of things can they learn that are going to help them grow in their careers? So What sort of was that aha moment that you had that made you want to go into the emotional leadership training?
So I was getting, like you just said, turnover in the specific hotel that I was working at the time. Turnover was just getting higher and higher. And I was called in as part of a group for to strategize on what can be done because at the time, it was taking about $4,500 to bring a team member on. So that included their drug testing, their training, and their uniforms, and so on and so forth. So $4,500 in a hotel is nothing to sneeze at. And when you're having, like, 15 to 20% turnover, that adds up really fast, and
Mm,
it wasn't, conducive. So they brought us in as a team in HR to figure out what can be done. So that's when I started to strategize on my own because I was in charge of creating the trainings. And in to their, grace, they gave me full autonomy on creating those trainings.
mhm.
So I was able to do what I wanted to a certain extent, obviously, but I use that to, mingle where the problem, to figure out where the problem was and to try to open up and see what can be done. And I started with just coaching a few leaders to just test my theories. And basically, what I found is lack of communication. And like I said, leaders weren't self-aware enough to be, leading, so to speak, other team members, right? They
Mm,
didn't know how they wanted to delegate. They didn't know how they wanted work to come to them or to go out. They didn't know how to communicate clearly what they needed from their team members because it was just, hey, you go do that and come back. And nobody was telling these people why they're supposed to be doing what they're doing. And
mhm.
so that was a big deal.
Were you finding that, this is common, I think, across all industries that there is this lack of onboarding, lack of training and professional development. Were any of the individual, like, employees coming back with feedback of not being satisfied with how they were trained or, like, what was sort of the feedback? And then how do you create, like, the framework to meet their needs?
Sure. So I was getting the so for the one side, I was getting, hey, I didn't get trained at all. I was just told how this is what I need to do and go do it. Or I was getting on the other side that, hey, I did get training, but it's not really conducive to what I'm doing.
Mm,
So one example that I have is in one um hotel that I've gone to several times now. It's a hotel here in South Florida, but the headquarters are in Atlanta where it gets colder, right? So some of the training is for that, like for cold weather. It's not for people that are here in South Florida where it doesn't get cold at all. Like we go down to 60 and that's it, right? And so that was causing an issue because they were trying to do things the way they would do them somewhere that's going down to 20 degrees as opposed to here. And this was for, outside maintenance of the hotel, but they're trying to tell them to do it the way that they would do it, over there. And nobody realized the issue with the training. So they did get the training, but it was the wrong training.
mhm.
So until they pointed it out to me and then I came in, because what I do is when I get, a gig as a consultant, I go in, I interview some people. And that was one of the things that were pointed out to me is that, hey, the training that we're doing is not the work that they're giving us is not conducive to the environment that we're in. So that was one of the things that I had to work on to rework the handbook, not straying away from their values or from their missions, but making it for the place that they're in, that building per se, right? So
Mhm.
that was one of the feedback that I can say that I've gotten a few times where they're generalizing because it's chain hotels, they're generalizing their training or their work model and it's not working for the team members.
That's interesting. So did you
Mhm.
begin this work while you were still in your corporate job?
I did.
Okay. Tell me about the transition from working on this as sort of a side thing
Mhm.
into turning this into your full-time job.
So I worked part-time on my business for I want to say 8 years. So I started in 2009 part-time, and I didn't go full-time until 2017. So that's, yeah, about 8 years. And for the first 8 years, I was doing both. It wasn't like a secret or anything. So hotels that needed consulting work, they would refer me to other hotels. Like they knew that this was a thing for me. But the good part about that is I got to learn as I was going. So I didn't have the pressure of I have to make money because I
Yeah.
still was in my full-time job. So I was able to slowly transition, and that transition gave me the chance to learn about how to approach leaders and how to be a better leader as well, and again, going back to the self-awareness, I had to look within and find out how I like things to be done, how what I want to get out of this business.
Mhm.
And it was easier for me when I go into um companies now to show the leaders that same process, because it was kind of a transition that I needed to go through. And even though these leaders are not transitioning from one job to the next, but they're having to go through that transition just to change their mindset and get that shift in, hey, yes, you are a leader, but also these people are human, and if you show them more vulnerability and you open up to them more, then they'll buy into your cause.
Let's face it, starting a business is hard work, and building a website for a business, that's another story. Why not hire some help? 35th Street Builders are not just website builders, they're dreamers. With experience spanning in startups to enterprises, 35th Street Builders will provide you with the mobile app and web development skills to get your business up and running. At 35th Street Builders, they pride themselves on affordability, reliability, and compassion. Ready to take some work off your plate? You can schedule an intro call with 35th Street Builders by going to their website at 3sb.io. That's the number 3, the letter S, the letter B.io. So,
Mhm.
talk to me a little bit about the services that you provide and some of the organizations that you work with.
Sure. So I've worked with Hard Rock, I've worked with Best Westerns, I've worked with Department of Homeland Security, I've worked with Department of Justice, and just to name a few. And the services I provide is I provide leadership training and
Mhm.
leadership coaching. But more importantly, I go into human resources and do employee relations consulting. So I go into their standard operating procedure manuals. I help them revamp their onboarding and offboardings. I teach them how to open up and be more comfortable with their team members so that their team members feel like they can come to them. Because a lot of places, believe it or not, the team members don't feel comfortable going to HR because in their mind, HR is there for the company, which it is. It's there to protect the company, but also the employee relations manager is there to protect the team members.
Hmm.
So, but the team members don't know this because they just feel like, oh, it's HR. What are they going to do? So we work on strategies to get the team members to trust the people operations team,
And
right?
how do you do that?
So I was just telling somebody like a few hours ago, if you start trusting them, then they'll automatically trust you. So I always start with the leaders. I don't like to put much on the team member because the team member is always going to reflect what you're projecting, right? So if the leaders start opening up, start communicating, start being transparent, then the team members will feel like, okay, there's some trust that's being established there. They're telling me the truth. They're opening up to me. Then I can trust them. I can go to them with my issues.
Hmm. How do you assess the unique needs and challenges of a specific organization before designing like a leadership development program?
So as I mentioned before, when I go in for consulting, I do go into the HR department and find out what the problem is based on what they brought me in for. But
Mhm.
also, I do interviews with team members, with managers, I find out from the source what is going on, so that, and then I go back and, analyze the both sides of the story to
Yeah.
figure out really what's going on, because like everything else, there's always a third side of that story.
Yeah.
Hmm.
When you were starting out with your business,
Hmm.
I feel that, as times have changed, workplaces have changed,
Hmm.
leaders have changed, what it means to go to work has changed. Like, what have you sort of like starting out, what systems and methodologies did you have in place with leadership organizations? And like, how do you think that they've changed um, in your business now with all of these other factors?
So when I first started out, I want to say, it was harder for me when I first started out than it is now. Um, as I as the years are going by and I'm dealing, I guess I don't like that word dealing, but I'm dealing with a different generation of
Mm,
people. Find that it's easier almost to speak to the generations now, because we're more open to, mental health and mental wellness, and there's more of self-awareness involved, right?
yeah.
So before, I was very heavily um dependent or relying on discs and PIs, and those types of personality tests, and um, those types of things, because people wanted to see numbers, they wanted to see the data. But now it's not a little bit, I should say a lot changed, to where it's transforming into more of a holistic type
Yeah.
of job, where I get to coach people therapeutically. I get to just tell them, hey, let's work on this and let's find out what's going on. Maybe the trauma is not even at work. Maybe, it was something that happened in your past when you were in your 20s or even in your teens. And we get to work that way, as opposed to before, where it was just, this is the data, this is what we're looking at, let's work on that to fix it.
And so are you working, you're speaking about something pretty serious and like
Mhm.
talking about, mental health in the workplace, and some of these issues that people bring to work may have nothing to do with work.
Mhm.
How do you go about that? Is it in your trainings? Are these group settings, or are you working individually with the employee?
So with employees, I do group trainings. I do group coaching. So I wouldn't go into individual mental health with an employee, but with leaders, I
Mm,
do individual coaching. So with the
mhm.
leaders, I am able to dig in more and help them and give them tools, so that they can at least notice if something is going on with one of their team members, and maybe refer them to a counselor or get them the help that they need.
What do you find are some of like the biggest struggles that people are dealing with in the workplace and within a team?
So there's a few. One of them I actually was talking about earlier as well, is the person might be a rock star team member in what they're doing. They know everything front and back. And then they get promoted and they're set up for failure, because they are not equipped to be a manager or a supervisor. They don't know how to, lead other people. And
Mhm.
so that's one of the things that I noticed that they struggle with a lot, because obviously, and rightfully so, they're wanting to promote from within, but they're not giving these people the proper training before they get promoted.
Yes.
And so they're pretty much setting them up for failure, even though it's not, on purpose. And so that's one of the struggles that I see. And then the other thing is, going back to the self awareness thing. Um, Even though we are more aware, even though we are more open now, we still get that, hey, I'm paying you to do a job. You need to just do your job and go home. Right. And life is not like that. So this is a struggle that's always happened. And this is like, we're now trying to work on fixing that. But it's a big deal still, where people are not telling their team members why they should be doing this, or how clearly they should express what needs to be done and what the end result should be. They
Mm,
just tell them, here's your task, do it. And people are rebelling.
yeah.
If they don't understand what they're doing, then they don't want to do it. So that's a struggle that I see.
Are people staying and then they become like cancers to the team because they're not happy, or are people leaving in droves? Like what sort of like trends are you seeing in situations where leadership is not the best and their employees are unhappy?
So after COVID, people are leaving. Like they're not staying anymore. They used to. Before, we found that people would just stay and give the bare minimum and do what I guess they're now calling silent quitting, but it's
Yeah.
been going on forever.
Yeah.
But now I think COVID and a bunch of layoffs gave people the realization that they can go out and do something else. And so they're not staying as much, but the ones that are staying are causing the whole team to, implode, so to speak. But in those cases, it's not just one person that's miserable. Most
Mm,
of the time, you'll find that it's the 90% of the team is miserable, right? And that's where you have to give that tough love to the leader of that team and be like, hey, if everybody on your team is complaining about something, it can't be everybody. It has to be you. Let's
yeah.
figure out what's going on. Let's figure out how we can fix it and make it better for everybody.
I've worked on teams where l- leaderships there's I've worked on teams that there are little pockets of people that are unhappy that bring down an entire team,
Oh,
and
yes.
leadership does not do anything. And
Mm-hmm.
so constantly the other members of the team who feel that, this job doesn't suck, but the team morale is down, and then they confront the leaders and the leaders still don't do anything about it. I guess like what yeah, what's that about? What is it about
So,
leadership sometimes that they feel like they can't, or they don't know what to do? Is it that they don't know what to do, or
yeah,
okay,
they don't know what they don't know, a lot of times, and some of them, if it's not broke, don't fix it kind of
okay.
mentality, like, it's not bothering me, so I'm just gonna not touch it, you know? And also you have the,
Mm,
teacher's pet type of people where they don't wanna ruffle any feathers, like, so it's their team that's having an issue, nobody else outside the team knows about it, so they're just gonna stay here and pretend like they don't see it so that other people don't hear about it, even though it's going to, domino effect eventually, but they still do that. They still just, let me just be quiet and try to fix it on my own, but they don't know what they don't know. Most of the time, they don't know what's happening, what's causing it, so they can't fix it, obviously. And when somebody comes from outside and points it out, sometimes they get offended or sometimes they're like, "Oh, no, that what you're saying is not the case," or whatever. So it's kind of one of those things that you have to like,
mhm.
how should I say, massage it until you can, get the person to see it from your point of view that, hey, you have to do something about this. You may have two people, and sometimes it's not the leader that's the problem. It is the employee that's just doesn't want to do their job, or they just have a bad attitude, or so on and so forth. But if you leave that one person with that crappy attitude, they create so much tension that they just bring everybody down around them. So you have to be able to, and then the other part of it is leaders that are afraid to confront people, right?
Mhm.
They're afraid to bring it up, like, they're not going to that person and being like, "Hey, what's going on with you? Is there something that I can help you with? Is there something going home that's causing this attitude or this problem or the lack of productivity?" Whatever it is, right? So, I think that's one of the reasons too, where they don't wanna confront the issue and they let it become a cancer, so to speak, like you said.
That is insane because we see
Mhm,
teams implode just because a leader can't step up to the plate and have a conversation. And I
mhm,
always get frustrated because I'm like, no one's saying to call this person out in the meeting. But as
mhm,
you mentioned, and as your experience shows, is like sometimes taking like that mental health method, that psychology method, and seeing like what else is happening that is
mhm.
contributing to um, you not being happy on this team.
Yeah.
Uh, that's really interesting. I want to know, do people call you when, for lack of a better word, shit has hit the fan?
unfortunately.
So let's talk about that. Do you think that people should probably call you when their team is doing well, right?
Yes, yes.
Um, because sometimes when your team is doing so well, the moment that it's not doing well, that's when people don't really know what to do because they never had any conflict.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. So I am the one that they call when, like you said, shit hits the fan. I rarely get the chance to go when they're doing well or what. So I usually come in when everything is in shambles. Although sometimes that's a good thing because I can pick up on things easier when there's already conflict. I can see it right off the bat, right?
Yeah.
But I would much prefer that we were working constantly, and that's what should be happening, obviously, in every company.
Mhm.
We're always working on, I like to say, the standard operating procedure manual, the values, the mission, they're living, breathing things that should be checked like at least every month, every 3 months, max every 3 months, where you just go and check it and get a pulse, see if everybody's doing okay, see how things are going. Your manual might change from one thing to the next just because the world changes, the environment changes, right? So when those things are not happening, then yes, things will implode, and they usually do eventually.
How long is your training usually?
It depends. So some of my training is just a day, depending on what needs to be done, and but the coaching side of that usually lasts 3 months, minimum. So even though I come in and I do a training for a week or a couple of days, the coaching behind it lasts 3 months because we want to make sure that we're following up with the leaders, making sure the managers are understanding and comprehending what we gave them, and you actually using the tools. Because how many times have you seen people go into trainings and then as soon as they walk out of the training, that's that. Like
Mhm.
that's where it stops. So
Mhm.
we try to make sure that we're following up, so that make sure that the tools that we give people are actually using them and they are making a difference.
What sort of success stories have you had from some of these trainings that you've led?
So my claim to fame is always that when the team members are happy, they take ownership of their roles. And
Okay.
those are always my success stories. Like once people start understanding why they're doing something, what they're doing, they pick up on it. They're like happy to do their job. They take ownership. They don't wait for leadership to tell them every step of the way. They make decisions. Obviously, to a certain extent, they can't make every decision, but they are more proactive in making decisions and doing what they're supposed to do. And once that happens, then the bottom line always grows. Like profit comes from that, obviously, because
Right.
once your team members are happy, they're going to make the clients, customers, guests happy, and there's no way but up.
Um, talking, I know that you work with hospitality and you've worked with other industries as well.
Mhm.
But when you work with people that are in like group, very like collaborative type of work,
Mhm.
do you find that there are people in the group that mm, are maybe like singled out or don't really have as many responsibilities as other people in the group? Like there are like the all-stars of the groups, and then there's the people that just want to be seen in a group and they're doing everything they possibly can to be seen, but they are not. And like how do you identify that and then communicate that to leadership to change that within the group dynamic?
So yes, yes, and yes. We do find people that are like the teacher's pets, and then the people that are like rightfully rock stars, and then we have the people that are just flying under the radar, want to be seen but are not being seen, and then we also have those that don't want to be seen and they're okay with staying on the low profile, doing the bare minimum. And one of the ways that I identify that is, even when I do like a training setting, I tend to ask if there's group work that is done, like if it's a high collaborative department or companies as a whole, I ask which groups usually work together. And when I'm doing trainings, I try to put those people together just so I can pay attention and see what's happening and how they, interact with each other. Another way that I take a look at that is sometimes I do like observation days where I'll just go into the company just to observe how work is being done. So if it's like a cubicle environment, I'll just walk the floors. If it's like a more hands-on environment, I'll visit with different areas. Like in a hotel, I sometimes go into the rooms to see how the housekeepers are doing their job. I'll go into the kitchen to see how the cooks and chef collaborates with each other. Just pretty much observing and then taking notes and then going back to either it's HR or chief operating officer and telling them what I've observed, what I see. Usually, I don't see the specific person that that the issues with, but
Mhm.
I can almost always tell that there is an issue in that group and that group needs to be dug deeper into.
Mm. I want to pivot a little bit
Mm-hmm.
into entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the hardest things about being an entrepreneur, especially starting out, is that you wear many hats.
Mm-hmm.
And the way to be successful in the steps to growing your business is by hiring people. I find that when I look at small businesses that are one man band operations, it's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to let go of the reins. Like, what are some
Mm-hmm.
of your tips for how entrepreneurs can be great leaders when they start hiring and
Mm-hmm.
also cultivate the skills of their new employees so that they can have a good work environment as well?
That is beautiful question. So one of the things I will say is you are 100% right about people not wanting to let go of the reins or not being able to because they are used to doing things on their own, rightfully so. So one of the main tips that I usually say give people like that is when you're hiring, you have to take your time. First, figure out what you would like from your new hire. Figure out why you're hiring that person. So a lot of times I'll find that people hire before they're ready or before they even need it, just because somebody told them that they should, hire a VA or hire an operator or something.
Yeah.
So understanding why you're making that hire, what you're going to allow that person to do is very important. And when you know that, then with your interview process, you can be clearer. You know exactly what to look for because you know what you're doing the hiring for, right? So
Hmm.
then you can cultivate those skills or find those skills so that you can cultivate them. And then the next step in that is to have candid conversation with this new hire, right? So that you can build a sense of trust between you and them. Because the one of the main reasons why especially small business owners are afraid to it's their baby. Like, they put their blood, sweat, and tears into the business and they don't want to just let it go to anybody. So cultivating communication so that there's a sense of trust between the two of you makes it to where you're you're you feel comfortable enough to delegate and to let that person have the reins of what they're supposed to be doing. But more importantly is have a strategy to delegate that you're comfortable with. Make sure that when you are asking the person to do certain tasks that they're clear, you know what results you're looking for, right? Don't just send them something and be like, hey, do this. And then you don't even know what you're looking for. And when it comes back, you're disappointed. And that spoils that trust right then and there, right? So
Sure.
set yourself up for that person, you and that person to thrive and then go from there.
When it comes to the mental health part of
Mm-hmm.
it, the emotional leadership coaching,
Mm-hmm.
like what are some tips and tricks that you can use that entrepreneurs can use for their employees?
So one of the main tip that I always give is self-awareness. And I say this a lot. I sound like a broken record. When you know exactly how you like things done and how you want something done in your business,
Mhm.
then it's easier for you to pass it along. And then those team members that you're hiring and bringing on, I would suggest that you kind of talk to them, or if you don't have the time, then maybe get somebody that can help them with their own self awareness. to
Mm-hmm.
understand what they want and how they want to work as well, because it's a two-way street, right? Amber knows how she wants to work, but if Stephanie doesn't know on the other side how she wants to take that work and run with it, then we're bumping heads. So make sure that that self-awareness is there on both sides. Make sure that you're taking leadership of your own role as a leader and passing them that down, because once they see that you're confident, you know what you're doing and what you're talking about, then those people are going to look up to you. They are going to trust you with their livelihood as well.
I feel that it's sort of difficult sometimes as an entrepreneur because when you talk about hospitality, you're working with these huge conglomerates that, like, with these jobs, although leadership is lacking, you still have benefits. You
Mm-hmm.
still have, a steady paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes when you're hiring as an entrepreneur, these are freelancers. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes these freelancers have full time jobs, but they want to do something extra on the side. I guess, how can you express like this? What I'm doing is very important and I'm hiring you as a freelancer to get the job done
Mm-hmm.
so that you guys could be on the same page and they understand how important this job is basically my.
So that what you just said is that candid conversation, especially with a freelancer where you cannot tell them, a lot of the things that they're doing, because they're probably using their own software, they're using their own things. So
Sure.
I think that in that specific example there, that candid conversation of you opening up and being a little bit vulnerable and saying, hey, this is really important to me. If we're not on the same page, let me know now, right? Type of thing. And obviously you wouldn't say it like that, but just opening up and having that conversation with the person. And then also the good thing about of hiring a freelancer, if you're hiring them for a specific job, you can test them. Like you can give them a test job to make sure that they know what they're doing.
Okay.
So I think in that sense, that's important, because it's kind of different than when you're hiring an actual employee. If you're hiring an employee, then you can't give them a test job. But if you're hiring a freelancer, then you can do that, right? And I think that's one of the things that I always suggest that people do when you're hiring somebody for a specific project or just a few hours a month, and so on and so forth. Give them a few tests, and obviously pay them for those test jobs, but you know that this is a test. And if it doesn't come out the way you want it, then you need to move on to the next person that can actually do it the way you would like it to be done.
So firing is okay.
Oh, yes.
I want to talk to you one more thing, just
Hmm.
while we're on the topic of entrepreneurship. I've
Hmm.
had guests on the show that are well into their what was a small business is now a full blown scalable
Hmm.
revenue driving business.
Hmm.
And what started off as an entrepreneur who was sort of the visionary,
Hmm.
the person that came up with the great idea and went on to hiring people and now has a whole team running the business,
Hmm.
realizes later as the business starts transitioning that they're no longer the leader needed for that particular role anymore.
Hmm.
So egos can get involved. Egos
Yes.
pride is a very big thing.
Yes. Yes.
Do you experience any of the like passing off the torch to new leaders for the betterment of the company, and how
Yes.
how do you go
Yes.
about that?
One of the main things that I like to tell people is that now you're no longer a business owner. You have to think like a CEO as opposed to just a business owner, right? And then I get the question, so what's the difference? And that's where I go into the CEO of the business has to manage all the business, like
Mhm.
every aspect, right? And you would burn out if you were to pick every single thing and be there for every little thing. There's no way that you could do that. So you have to understand where it's time to step back and be like that bird's eye view over all these leaders. And the best thing you can do at this point is make sure that you're hiring people that reflect you, right?
Mm. Mhm.
And sometimes that's the hard part too, even with the ego thing. That's the hard part, is like, because you're going to always think, oh, people can't do this job the way I can. I'm the
Yeah.
one that built this, right? So it's letting that part go. That could be hard, and that may need some, massaging, some coaching, to let that part go where you're thinking that people can't do it the way you can, because you can hire skillful people and then step back and become a CEO and, revel in what you've created.
Absolutely. I also find then just knowing people that run businesses and
Hmm.
also working a full-time job myself,
Hmm.
I always think that the teams that are like the motley crew, like the one that you're like, how do these people would never be friends outside of work because they have so many different
Hmm.
personalities and skill sets and strengths and weaknesses. But when you come together, that's when you really do the best work.
Yes,
So
yes.
hiring people that are different from you or smarter than you, not me necessarily
Hmm.
smarter, but have a different skill set. That really,
Different skill
that's
set. Yes.
yeah, that's truly I think the best way.
Yes, definitely. You have to hire people that complement you. And when I say that reflect you, I'm saying values. Like if you're going to hire people, you have to hire people that share your values, because that's what's going to give you the sense of, okay, these people are following the same path that I'm following. So yes, I feel comfortable leaving my business in their hands, but definitely they have to complement you. They have to each have their own skill sets, things that they do practically better than you if you're doing it right, you're going to hire people that could do it better than you can, and that group of people coming together is where your strength is,
Yeah.
definitely.
What has been the most rewarding part of running Dembo Incorporated?
So the most rewarding part for me is having happy, clients, having people come back to me and be like, "Oh, hey, Stephanie, the environment changed. The mental wellness in my company is way better. The culture is, people are happier." Those are the things that make me happy. And also, I always say, like, when your employees are happy, the bottom line grows.
Mm.
So a lot of times I have people come back and tell me, the percent year over year has grown because people are taking ownership of their jobs and profit is getting made.
Yeah.
So,
And
mhm,
and aside from the happy clients and
mhm,
some of the challenges, meaning maybe like dealing with a hard organization or a hard
mhm.
team, like running your business, what do you find is one of the biggest challenges for you?
So for me, it's being everywhere. Like I have the same problems. Like I wish I can kill myself. The thing is with coaching, it's a little different. Like I can't really delegate my knowledge, right?
Sure.
So that part is challenging where when I have to figure out ways. And what started to do is hire people that are in mental health, in mental health industry, and then train them on the operations side, because it's easier to give them the hard skills of operation than it is to give them the soft skills of mental health counseling.
Wow.
So that is what I've been doing, but it's a struggle to, figure leverage my knowledge and figure out how to pass it along.
What's next for your business?
Um, I am looking into doing more and more retreats. I've been doing retreats once or twice a year, and they've been really, really great for me and for the feedback that I've gotten. So I want to do more of that. I think the next leg of my business is going to be like monthly retreats where I take people to different countries or even here in the United States and different areas.
That's awesome. And good luck
Hmm.
to you. That's
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you.
Where can people find you if they'd like to
Sure.
hire you?
Sure. They can find me online. It's demboinc.com, and that's DEMBOINC.com. And they can also find me on LinkedIn at Dembo Inc.
Stephanie, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I think that you're leaving people feeling empowered that they can go back and, be great leaders, but also for the
Hmm.
entrepreneurs when it comes to the hiring process, how
Hmm.
they can hire and retain freelancers and hopefully potential full-time employees. Like this was a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Amber. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. I love your energy, by the way.
Oh,
So
thank
thank
you.
you so much for having
Thank you. This was
me.
great.
Thank you, Stephanie. That's it for this week's episode of A Bright Idea podcast. Today's guest was Stephanie Coradin, founder of Dembo Incorporated. You can hire Stephanie to coach your leadership teams by going to her website at www.stephaniecoradin.com. If you loved today's episode, then don't forget to like and subscribe to my podcast and leave a review. Shout out to my producers Kayla and Chris for the edits each week. If you have a bright idea or a topic you think I should cover on the show, hit me up on social media or email me at amber@abrightidea.show. Until next time, I'm Amber Key.